You hear a lot about the positive impact of digital minimalism, but I don't think there's enough information being shared about the dark side of digital minimalism. If you don't know what digital minimalism is, it is the practice of being intentional with the tech that you use. So using tech more as a tool rather than letting it run your life. I started practicing or kind of getting into digital minimalism in September of 2023. I was going through a difficult time managing my visual issues, plus my job, and everything kind of culminated, and I was spending about 10 hours a day on my devices. I knew something had to give, and I kind of hyper-focused on my smartphone use. I ended up going down the road of dumb phones and different devices and learning some skills along the way. And along the way, I've also seen some problems that I need to point out with digital minimalism. Now, digital minimalism as a whole, I think, is overwhelmingly positive. Of course, having that balance with tech in your life is super important, but how people go about that can be very different, and the interpretation of digital minimalism can be quite toxic. Some people may interpret digital minimalism as an all or nothing practice. If you can't go to the extreme, then you're not a true digital minimalist. I think having the term digital minimalism is at the core of the problem. I think people are hyper fixated on labels, being part of a tribe, and that can cause a lot of problems in itself. And I don't think that's the goal of digital minimalism. It's really a personal thing. It's not something to be a part of a group or to fit in or to feel that you need to do something that maybe you don't want to do. Now, I know for myself, when I got into digital minimalism, I felt the goal was to use as little tech as possible, of course, and kind of go to the extreme to prove to myself that I didn't need a smartphone in my day-to-day life. Unfortunately, I learned that wasn't the case, and I went through a lot of frustration and a lot of difficulties relating to that mentality that I had in the beginning. Of course, after I learned more and more about digital minimalism, and I read more books, watched more YouTube videos, of course, I realized that everyone's journey is completely different and that I need to stop comparing myself to other people. Now, recently, that has been a blaring issue for me. I really got into digital minimalism last year when I discovered digital minimalism devices. Now, these are devices targeted at the community specifically and marketed towards people who are interested in getting off of their smartphones or really trying to change their relationship on how they use their devices. These devices can be tools of friction, and can have a lot of benefits. For example, there are devices such as the Minimal Phone, the Mudita Kompakt, and the Light Phone 3. Now, I'm pointing out these 3 specific devices because I've been testing them recently, and I've noticed a huge issue with these devices in particular. Now, this issue has been pointed out to me before in comments or in other videos, but from myself, I've been really having a difficulty getting behind these devices for one main reason: accessibility. These devices are not made for people like me. If you don't know, I am legally blind. I have ADOA, autosomal dominant optic atrophy, which is an inherited disease where I have progressive vision loss, and I'm currently legally blind. This means I need specific accessibility settings, or at least the minimum, to use certain devices, especially for technology. Now, technology for the blind community is super important. It's a tool that we can use to read, of course, to communicate, and to have access to the outside world. So it's really important to have a tool that you can make calls with and do the basic functionalities. Now, if you're blind and practicing digital minimalism, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity. And what I've noticed recently with digital minimalism devices is that accessibility is either an afterthought or just not a thought at all. For example, the first device I tested this year was the Mudita Kompakt. It is an e-ink digital minimalist device, and e-ink in general, most people think is easier for people who are visually impaired. I agree, it does create a lot less eye strain, but if you don't have the additional accessibility settings to adapt the device to your visual impairment, it doesn't really matter what kind of screen you're looking at. If you can't make basic modifications such as enlarging the text size, adding a bit more contrast, or even changing the theme to make it more adapted to your visual impairment, honestly, it doesn't help at all. And unfortunately, when I went back and I looked further into the device, I couldn't find any modifications I could make to make the text a bit larger. Of course, you can go into the Android layer of the device and make modifications, add certain applications, but this should be a base level function in any device. You shouldn't have to have a technical background to be able to modify your device just to be able to use it. That's just not accessible, and it's not fair. Another device that came onto the market this year was the minimal phone. Now, this phone came out as an e-paper device and promoted a way of getting off your device and being able to see, read easier. And on paper, it did look like it would be quite an accessible device. It has a physical QWERTY keyboard. And for those of you who are not visually impaired, keyboards, buttons, all of these functions are quite amazing when you're visually impaired. You can hit a key, open an app, and it makes your device that bit more usable than the average smartphone, for example. But unfortunately, the minimal phone wasn't optimized to take accessibility into account. Many of you saw this when I did my live unboxing video of the minimal phone itself. I had to make the font larger so that I could see it, but unfortunately when you did that with this certain screen ratio, you wouldn't be able to unlock your SIM card, and with this specific device, there's a lot of bugs where the fingerprint sensor won't work, and you can't access your phone without entering the code to unlock your device and unlock your SIM card. So I was blocked out due to accessibility reasons, and that's a bit frustrating because I just can't use that device and count on it. Lastly, I've been testing the Light Phone 3. Now, I'm very shocked by this device on how much I really struggle to use it. I had the highest hopes for it because it is a high contrast device with a black background and white text. From all of the images, it looked like it would be a bit easier to see by default. But once I got the device, I realized that it was severely lacking in accessibility tools. When you go to the accessibility menu, you have the option to connect hearing aids. That's it. You can't increase the font size, and this becomes an issue when you're using specific applications such as notes, text messaging, or even making calls. I know for myself, I really struggled to see this device. I would have liked to be able to change the font style as well as the font size. And I do have usable vision as somebody with low vision. So I can only imagine somebody who has worse vision than I do, they would really struggle to use this device, and there's no screen reader, so you can't even rely on that. The more and more I look into digital minimalism as a whole, the more I realize that it is a privileged standpoint coming from people who probably don't have a disability, especially a visual one. A lot of devices in the digital minimalism realm are smaller devices, which does create more friction and does reduce your ability to use certain applications, or you're less likely to get sucked into doom scrolling. And I completely understand and back that. But if you're somebody who's visually impaired, this can add an additional friction that doesn't really help you when it comes to digital minimalism. It can create extra frustration, of course. It can prevent you from using your device as a tool. I myself personally have made wrong phone dials many times. I make more mistakes in my text messaging, and honestly, I just feel bad about myself. My self-esteem goes down a bit. I feel more useless than I do in my day-to-day life, and it's just another struggle added to the list of struggles I deal with everything else. I don't need to be reminded every time I open my device how blind I truly am. I just need my device to work when I need it to work. So the more I go into digital minimalism, the more I've tested different devices. I've even gone back and tried vintage devices such as older Blackberries. And the thing is, if you use a vintage device, you'll find that there's even more accessibility features found in modern digital minimalist devices. I'm talking about devices from 2007 or even before. They have the option to change the font size at least, maybe even the theme or the contrast. And these are just basic accessibility features that should be mandatory on every device. So not seeing them on these newer digital minimalist devices is kind of disheartening, and seeing the price tag attached to these devices makes me physically ill. I understand that these devices are made in smaller batches. They are a very niche product, but just because something is niche doesn't mean it shouldn't be accessible to a wider audience. I know there are laws in place. I know some laws in Europe have passed recently, so I think accessibility needs to be taken in consideration with every device. It's not something that's crazy to implement. I know it might interfere with the base values of the core values of a company, but if the core values of your company are to exclude those who can't see, that's really not a company I want to support. Now, another reason that digital minimalism isn't really appealing to me is the price tag that goes along with being a digital minimalist. A lot of people feel that they need these specific devices in order to be a true, pure digital minimalist. You don't. You don't need these expensive devices in order to really feel fulfilled or to be able to reach your goals. I know for myself, I felt this was necessary to have a specific dumb phone, but honestly, after testing hundreds of devices at this point, I realized the device doesn't really matter. The device needs just to be a tool that you can use in your day-to-day life. How you use those elements on your device are more important than the device itself. I know for myself, I am currently using a full-fledged smartphone, but it's a device that I would never put in the category of a digital minimalist device. It's not a flagship smartphone. It's the TCL Nextpaper 60. I will do a full review on the device itself, but it's not a device that I would recommend to people for digital minimalism. But as somebody who's visually impaired, I would, because it is easy to see. That's the base for me. Afterwards, I can decide which apps go on the device, how I manage my use, but those are skills that I've learned along the way and not necessarily given by a device itself. This is just about trial and error, learning which apps you actually need, how you want to use them, and what works in your lifestyle. I think digital minimalism sometimes can be a toxic place. It is very much about who can go the furthest, who uses a specific device, and if you use a device out of the norm, for example, if you choose to sideload or modify a device how you wish, you may get judged for that. You may get feedback for that is negative. And I believe that technology is a freedom. If you own a device, you should be able to do with it as you want. You purchase that device, you want to use that device how you want to. And if a device is so restrictive that you can't even modify the font size or make it usable because you have a disability, is that really a device you want in your life? Is that how you want to feel, so walled in by your disability and trying to overcome an addiction to your devices, but then being held back because you can't see on your device? It's just a vicious cycle, and I don't think it's healthy for anybody, to be honest. And this is one of the main reasons I've kind of stepped back from promoting or talking about digital minimalism in a sense of a lifestyle. I feel that digital minimalism is a privileged position that some people can practice and some people can get into to an extreme measure. But the general population is so varied and people are so different, have so many different use cases. And as somebody, again, who is blind, I won't be able to fit in that mold. I will never be that person who can use a light phone or a Mudita Kompakt 24/7 because I have specific needs, and I shouldn't feel bad about that. So going forward in my content, I'm really focusing about using tech intentionally, whether that's an operating system that you're using, specific applications that I'm using, or anything related to technology. I'm trying to take an approach of, do I need this app? Is it bringing positives or negatives to my life? Am I losing time in it? And focusing a little bit less on the devices. I think there's a device for everybody out there. Like I said, I'm using a TCL Nextpaper 60. Is this the best flagship device ever? No, but honestly, it's the best device that I've ever used in regards to being visually impaired. I'm sorry if this video comes off as a bit ranty, but I feel like a lot of things have been sitting on my chest about this topic of digital minimalism, and I really wanted to go over it. And I know some people feel the same. I know some people won't agree with me, but I just want to share where I'm coming from in regards to digital minimalism. I want to thank all of the channel's supporters and thank all of you for watching, and see you soon.